Ryan, this is fairly big news that I haven't seen basically any coverage from the corporate media of. And I looked, actually, when the Restrict Act, which is being supported, it's sponsored by Mark Warner, has a very bipartisan coalition behind it, 11 Democrats, 11 Republicans. It is aimed at TikTok. It does not say the word TikTok once in the bill, which is always a giant red flag here in Washington. When a bill that is aimed at doing one thing doesn't mention it, that's always a sign that the language is probably wildly overly broad. Some screenshots from the bill started circulating on Twitter. And I think this is where a lot of people in the media, myself included, turned and paid attention to the Restrict Act after Mark Warner was promoting it on Face the Nation Sunday. If you dig into the text of this bill, it is outrageously broad. And I think it was Greg Price on Twitter who said this is the Patriot Act for the internet. A couple of things. This is Michael Sabolic. He says there's a reason the White House supports this legislation. They don't want to ban TikTok. The bill gives them a gigantic loophole to avoid doing so. The Warner-Thune Restrict Act is not a TikTok bill. If this thing passes, the chances of a TikTok ban or forced divestment grow incredibly small. Why? The bill slow walks actions against transactions that are under review right now.
Right.
So if anything, when we saw that like bipartisan display of animosity towards TikTok, which by the way is like 5 years overdue, in Congress last week, and people who are maybe on the anti-establishment side started to get nervous, rightfully so. This is why.
Right. And we already have CFIUS, which is what they're sort of referring to. So CFIUS is a law that says that if there's some type of infrastructure that is critical to the United States that is being taken over by a foreign government, then that can't just be a normal business transaction. It has to get approved by this CFIUS board. I think one example was I think the UAE back in 2006 tried to buy a bunch of ports. And this was right after, a couple years after 9/11. And the country was like, you know what, we don't want to sell our ports to a foreign government. And no offense to UAE, but just in general, we'd like to keep control of that. As what's Donald Trump's line, you don't have a country.
Yeah.
Like if somebody else controls your ports, like that, you can imagine how that could become problematic at some point.
Yes.
And so that's why there has to be these CFIUS reviews. And so if there is a case that the government can make that TikTok is encroaching on some type of critical infrastructure, where social media, the narrative control is basically what this is coming down to, then put it before the CFIUS review and beat it there. Like in other words,
which is where it is.
Right. Which is where it is, and it frankly should be. And you already have the laws on the books. So then why this Resist Act? Why this overly broad piece of legislation that they're pushing forward? And the people who are circulating these screenshots on Twitter might seem paranoid, but if you read the law, they're right.
Yes.
Like this, it is extremely overbroad. It even mentions the Patriot Act. It's using Patriot Act language in the
combines
in
powers.
Its definitions.
Right. It combines powers with Patriot Act. It references parts of the Patriot Act that would apply in this case to the entities they're describing.
And some of it is just funny, jingoistic American imperialism. I think we have this first part up here where it says, where they define foreign adversary, means any foreign government or regime determined by the Secretary pursuant to Sections 3 and 5 to have engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons. So all the Secretary would have to do is say a country fits this definition, and then if that country has any controlling share, any share at all in the company, that it would then be under the kind of unilateral authority of the Secretary. And then they list some, just in case you're curious about who they are. These ones are definitely included. China, Cuba, get out of here. Cuba, are you serious? The Cuban apps, come on. Iran, of course, North Korea, Russia, and Venezuela, but they specify Venezuela under the regime of Nicolas Maduro Moros. So Venezuela, as long as they get rid of
because we don't recognize. Right?
Yeah, right. So that's why they're saying like that Venezuela doesn't really exist as far as we're concerned, but since it's actually alive now, we're going to put them in this law. And then when I said any amount of stock that they own, they define holding as, quote, an equity interests a stock,
Yes.
a security, a share, a partnership interest, an interest in a limited liability company, a membership interest, or any participation right or other equivalent, however designated, and of any character. So basically, if anybody that the secretary finds to have done anything negative to any U.S. person has any interest in a company, then that company comes under their purview.
It's nuts. Tucker Carlson called attention to what you were saying about foreign adversaries, and he says, what's a foreign adversary and who gets to decide? The Secretary of Commerce and the Department and the DNI, not the Congress. They get to decide what foreign adversaries are. He goes on to point out that the transactions with foreign adversaries covered by the Restrict Act would include, quote, this is from the bill, any acquisition, importation, transfer, installation, dealing in, or use of any information and communications technology, product or service, including ongoing activities such as mandated services, data transmission, software updates, repairs, or the provision of data hosting services. And it gives the government basically the ability to tap into all kinds of your different communications, technological communications methods in order to make these determinations, evaluations as they're referred to in the bill. It's just incredibly broad. No surprise that you have a bipartisan coalition of Mark Warner, John Thune, all kinds of establishment Republicans and Democrats are ready to have 21 sponsors is a fairly big deal. Josh Hawley has a clean TikTok ban on the table, and he has for a while. It is just a ban of TikTok. Of course, that's not what they want to do when they say they want to ban TikTok. They want to expand the surveillance powers of the federal government, and that is exactly what they put in writing here.
And when reading these types of bills, it's always useful to go to the very end of a section because there'll be specific, and then the very last one will be like, and anything else we didn't cover.
Right, yeah.
And they have a good example of this one here, Section 3A, subsection 2 here, that a company that, quote, otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of United States persons. So all of these things, but then also anything that we say is unacceptable. Like literally, if it's unacceptable, well, what's something that's not acceptable? Well, it's something that's unacceptable. So
why do you ask?
It's right there in the law. My T-shirt is explaining it. I don't understand why it's raising so many questions. And I think this goes to the broader point that the debate has been held publicly around data security and privacy, which, as somebody who has covered data security and privacy for 15 years now, it makes a mockery of the way that Congress thinks about data security and privacy. They have no interest for them. I mean, there is a bipartisan coalition that we've talked about on this show before that does really good work in trying to push back against the national security state when it comes to this. But in general, the majority of Congress, it does not care about privacy, does not care about that type of thing.
They barely understand it.
And so to have them now saying that they're so concerned about your data that they're going to ban TikTok just doesn't pass the sniff test. What it really is about, and I think Crystal's talked about this too, is that they don't like the fact that a China-backed social media company can control the narrative inside the United States. I think they should just have that debate.
Yeah,
because I think you can actually make a case like, okay, you know what? Maybe that isn't good. And a lot of other countries would say, you know what? We don't want if Voice of America, for instance, was like as dominant in China as TikTok is in the United States.
It's unthinkable.
China would be like, no.
What are you doing?
And in fact, lots of countries did ban Voice of America because we're sending in American propaganda, and then we would try to like figure out ways to like get it in anyway. Like this, the propaganda war between countries has been basically part of kind of geopolitics going back to the medieval ages with like ever since you had a printing press.
Yeah.
You had people slipping propaganda in behind enemy lines. So have that argument rather than trying to pretend like all of a sudden you care about privacy.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And the House Financial Services Committee put out a tweet where they said the Restrict Act is using TikTok as a smokescreen for the largest expansion of executive power since the IEEPA. The U.S. can't beat China by becoming more like the Chinese Communist Party, which is to say expanding surveillance powers massively over people. I think that's fairly well put. And it signals to me honestly, that the Restrict Act has become, in short time, fairly toxic. I expect you'll see people actually revoke their support for the bill. I don't think it'll get much more support since it's gotten this level of public attention, at least on the right. I have, again, really not seen mainstream, so-called mainstream outlets cover this at all. The bill has been out for a while. Some conservatives were on top of it several weeks ago, but I think that even the House Financial Services tweet is from several weeks ago, but really not getting any coverage in the mainstream press. That said, it's not going to pick up any more Republicans. I'm fairly confident at this point.
I would, if I were going to make an appeal to my fellow lefties, I would say, would you want to give this authority to Donald Trump to pressure YouTube? Let's say he has a falling out with Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is like, juicing the algorithm against Trump. Would you want Trump to be able to threaten to shut down Twitter because Saudi Arabia, has a gigantic interest in it? Do you want Trump to be able to threaten YouTube, or Trump to be able to threaten Facebook, or any president to have this amount of authority? I made those arguments all during the Obama era over the drone war and over other warnings of what a theoretical Republican president who followed Obama might do with this executive authority that Obama was aggregating toward himself, and it all fell on deaf ears. So I'm not sure that this argument is going to work well with them either.
And of course, it turned out that all of your warnings were just hyperbolic and wrong. And
Trump didn't do anything. Didn't abuse executive authority at all. That was fine.
Why would he do that?
That was totally fine.
And the other thing that I would just add really quickly is the administrative state, or the executive branch, is one of the most indirect forms of democracy that we have right now, especially the way it's abused, the way the powers that rest in the administrative state are often abused. And this punts so much power to the Secretary of Commerce. So that the bill is specifically just creates a new universe of powers for the Secretary of Commerce in a way that is very hard to hold to account outside of a presidential election. You'd have to take this out basically on the President of the United States. So another thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and the Secretary of Commerce is basically just a big donor. That's the cabinet position that goes to the richest person.
Right, yeah.
In this administration and the last one.
Hey guys, ready or not, 2024 is fully upon us now, and Sagar and I have been brainstorming ways that we can really up our game for this critical election.
Yeah, we rely on our premium subs to expand our coverage, to add staff, to upgrade the studio. We just want to give you the best independent coverage of this election, which is possible. So if you can help us out, become a premium subscriber today, breakingpoints.com, or the link is down here in the description video. It really means the world to us. And if you like what we're all about, this is the best possible way to keep us 100% independent, working only for you.